Hey guys, I'm Katherine Whitlock. I'm going to be doing the Emacs portion of this talk. Yeah, you guys are easily welcome to have any questions, because I know at least in the SSE the majority of people are Vim users and they may not know a lot about Emacs or how it works or how it operates. So any questions are gladly welcome. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of history. So Emacs was originally written as a set of editor macros, which is where the name comes from, Emacs, for an editor called Tico. Tico was used as an editor back on tapes, when computers still used tape reels, and it was designed to go backwards and forwards and be able to edit lines. It was originally written by Richard Stallman as a way to rebind the commands used in Tico easily to other keyboard shortcuts than what was available. So for a little bit of comparison, this is what Tico looks like. This is a standard Hello World script written in C. And then in order to replace hello with goodbye, this is actually the Tico code that you would put in. And people found that really confusing a lot of times. And so Emacs was developed as a method for making things like this a little bit simpler, because macros would allow you to specify certain lines and then only enter in certain commands, which would then be placed and executed by the Tico editor on command. So Multics Emacs was the first version of Emacs to use Lisp. This later became the standard, as Lisp is now what is used by Emacs today for scripting and what is mostly written in. But Multics Emacs was the first one. It's important to note that Emacs is actually a family of editors. There's not one editor, though it's known as GNU Emacs, the standard one. There's also X-Emacs, which is another popular version. And there's other versions such as Aquamax, which is used for the Mac and stuff like that. So the first real implementation of Emacs in Lisp was actually done by James Gosling, who's the inventor of Java. He wrote Emacs for Unix, because at the time it actually did not run on Unix, it ran on an IBM mainframe, which then went to terminals. But he ported it and wrote it in C and this sort of Lisp called mock Lisp. Later Richard Stallman went back to his project, because he was the original writer for it, and ported it so that it would be completely open source and completely available to people on Unix systems. And this was called GNU Emacs, and it was the first release of the GNU project. GNU Emacs was written in the majority in C, the base was written in C, and then it implemented a sort of Lisp called Emacs Lisp, or eLisp. And what eLisp allows is scripting and direct configuration within the editor on the fly. So, okay, that's later. Actually, let's go back. So, what Emacs is it's an editor that is modeless. What does that mean? So a modeless editor is, in comparison to Vim, because I'm going to draw Vim comparisons so people know Vim. In Vim, when you open up Vim for the first time, it's always like, here's a help screen. To get started editing, press I. That I is a command to go into insert mode. In Emacs, there is no insert mode. In Emacs, you start up and you're immediately given a buffer, which is an area you can type into, and you can immediately start writing code. There's no command mode or text mode. Instead, Emacs uses things called keychords, and keychords are what are used to input commands into Emacs. And so commands like go to next line or go to previous line are all bound to keychords which involve control or meta. Control and meta are often used as similarities. So in Vim you have little e, capital E. In Emacs you have control E, alt E. These are simply different ways of using the keychords to alter the command itself. So where does Emacs really become powerful? I find Emacs is really powerful with Lisp, mostly because since it was developed using Lisp, and a lot of the users who use Emacs are Lisp users, the majority of plugins that are really powerful, I find, are actually very well adapted for Lisp. So I use Emacs for Lisp a lot. I can give a demo now, because I think that's where we really want to go and how we're going to get into this. So. Oh, showing up. Okay, one moment. Okay, so as you may notice, it does take a little while to start up. There's actually a reason for this. So Emacs is fairly memory hungry, which is something I'm going to talk about. So on older systems, Emacs was actually written pretty small. It was mostly C, and it didn't use a lot of plugins or anything like that. As its user base grew, plugins grew, Emacs became more and more less memory efficient. So it does take a little while to boot up. Instead, what Emacs uses is a mode called Damon Mode, which is where you actually have an Emacs process running in the back end, and then you have a client that connects to it. And so you have a constantly running Emacs process when you start up your computer, and then you can actually start it up immediately. So if I were to show you what an example is. So if I start up Emacs just in the terminal. It actually does take a while. So I think E and W. It's Emacs Node. So this is how it starts up without a config. Like, it's pretty fast. But you start adding a config and having your own configuration and having your own customizations. This is going to get slow pretty fast. So what people did was they decided we're going to run Emacs in Damon Mode. So I think I have E. Yep, Emacs starts up in Damon Mode. So it starts up, loads all my plugins, suddenly starts up, and we now have Emacs. But say I don't want to use it anymore. I just want to quit it. I have a backup. So I've heard a lot of complaints about how Vim is a lot faster than Emacs in starting up. I don't really find that a problem because running in Damon Mode really doesn't use up that much of my system memory. It's like 256 megs maybe. On older systems that may be an issue, but I don't find it a problem. So that's Damon Mode. Now, what are some of the really cool things about Emacs? So let's open up a file that I have. So here I have a Ruby file. And this Ruby file is actually part of a project that we're going to work on. I'm not going to talk about it much. I'm just going to use this for showing how to navigate around a file. So as I mentioned before, CE goes to the end of a line. CW is the mark. Okay, sorry. CB goes backwards one character. CF goes forward one character. CN goes next line. CP goes previous line. So they're mostly phonetical based, as you can see. It's not too hard to pick it up. It does kind of stress your fingers sometimes because you're like, I want to go to next line. I want to go to previous line. And you don't have HJKL support like you do in Vim. Instead, you're reaching across your keyboard to go CN or CP. And that can get kind of annoying. So you can actually rebind your key bindings, which is something that a lot of Emacs users do. So I'm going to go over, I think one of the powerful things is, oh, I do not know what I just did. Okay, well I minimized, that's cool. So, there's this thing called the kill ring. What the kill ring does is you have a set of text that you can select. And as you select text, and as you cut that text, if you keep selecting and cutting more text, it'll actually just append that text to itself. So you get this huge thing, which is actually all of the text that you cut. And then when you paste it, it actually collects all that text. You can actually clear it by doing another command before you execute the yank. The paste is what it's called, or the yank. And it'll actually clear its buffer. But if you don't, you have this whole thing called the kill ring that collects all of your code. And some people actually kind of like this. I've never really personally used it before, but I've heard it's useful in like refactoring and stuff like that because you can collect different pieces of code and then paste them around in different areas. Yeah, so that's basic movement. CW, CN, CF, CP, CB. Move down one screen is CV, and meta V goes up. So that's the control meta thing again. So control V down, meta V up. Yank is yank. W is kill. Yank. Y is yank. So CW will actually cut. Meta W will actually paste or copy, and then CY will actually paste. So I'm going to show off some plugins now, because I feel like plugins are probably one of the most powerful things that Emacs has, and that's why I use it. So, this is my Emacs content file. It is written in Lisp, in Emacs Lisp to be exact. So what is it doing? Okay. So the first 2 lines state that I have this folder called .emacs.d, and all my plugins are being contained in it. So I'm adding those to the load path. And then I load a file that I have called load path, and it's actually a macro that loads all the files in the load path. This next line is for a plugin I have installed. ELGet is a repository and plugin manager for Emacs that is very, very recent, like I think within 12 months recent. But it's gained a lot of traction with the community. Emacs 24 actually has built-in plugin support, but there's a lot of different ways to get plugins, like Marmalade and ELGet and Emacs built-in plugins, and I think there's even like an Emacs mirror somewhere that connects stuff. But I found that ELGet is probably one of the best ways to do it because it pulls straight from Git. So you want a plugin and you want to be able to update it from source, use ELGet, and I find it's the best way to do it. Their recipe is actually open source, so you can actually contribute your own like plugin source links. And I actually did that. I have a friend who wrote Jmode, which is a major mode, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. But what he did was he wrote this mode, and then I contributed the recipe for it to ELGet so that I can actually use Jmode inside my own editor. So ELGet, this basically says that if I don't have ELGet installed, let's go get it and install it. So it does that, and then it syncs up. So it's syncing up what plugins ELGet actually has installed and requires them. This is IDEO mode. You actually saw me using IDEO mode, but you didn't know it. So in traditional Emacs, let's see if I can find it. In traditional Emacs, if I were to do a find, there's actually no like list down here of what folders I have. And so what IDEO mode does is it appends folders down here, so you can actually go through it, scroll through it, and select the ones that you want. Okay. I have a window system. Yeah, I'm using Monokai as my syntax highlighting theme. Molokai when I'm in X. Powerline is the thing down here. Okay. So then we get to CDET. So CDET is a editor system that was designed for Emacs so that it would be easier to browse through your code. I know Vim has, what is it? Tag list? Yes. CDET is the equivalent of tag list for Emacs. It goes through your code, analyzes it, and finds matching areas and tags. And so you can actually have another piece, which I have lower down, I think. Which is called EDE plus ECB, which is the Emacs code browser, which gives me, yeah, that. This is the Emacs code browser. This is one of my favorite plugins. It gives you a file browser, a project browser, function browser, and then a history for all your files. So it's basically tagless, but it also has a lot of power because CDET, it relies on CDET, and CDET is constantly being improved. So there is Ruby support, Lisp support, C support, C++ support. Pretty much any language you can think of, it can find tags based on where the location is in regex. And then it updates the stuff. So you can actually, I think my version is broken because I can't just click, I have to click and press enter. But I can actually browse around inside, and it'll jump straight to code and stuff like that. So that's CDET and ECB. Slime is probably one of the biggest reasons people use Emacs. So I was talking about Lisp before. And Emacs is most commonly used, at least that I know of, for developing in Common Lisp. And Common Lisp is this language that has a REPL, a read-eval print loop. And a lot of people have a read-eval print loop open in one window, and then the favorite editor open in another window, and they have them like tiled and stuff like this. And Emacs users are like, I'm using a terminal. I don't have windows. How can I use a REPL inside my code? And so they developed Slime. And Slime is a REPL hook so that you can actually use Lisp. It's the superior Lisp interaction mode. and you can actually load your code directly from a Lisp source file into Slime, have it eval, and then simply test it by calling functions inside Slime. So it's pretty much automatic evaluation and testing. It's really useful when you need to figure out why there's this bug going wrong, and you need to like check the value of a function after it's been evaluated or something like that, and you can do that. So Slime's pretty cool. I also use PairEdit, which is a minor mode, which is, like I said, something I'm going to talk about, which just, whenever you enter in one parenthesis, it'll add a second parenthesis, and you can push parentheses around. I know Vim does have a Lisp mode, which does the same thing, Vim-L. And I think that's pretty cool. Yeah. So, let's see. Autocomplete. Emacs does not come with autocomplete support. It has an autocomplete system called Autocomplete, which is a plugin. And it has actually a similar setup. So if I go, let's see, what's a good way to show off autocomplete? Yeah, so here's that. So I'm starting a new, actually this is just a variable set. So I'm going to set a variable, I'm going to call a function to set a variable. And so I start my open close parentheses, which is the Emacs list, and then I start entering the name of a function. And autocomplete says, okay, so you want this one. And if it's the one that's highlighted and I don't want that one, I can wait for like half a second, and it'll pop up with this pop-up. And this actually lists all the functions that it can find in the source files. It'll parse them, and read the equivalent docs information for it, and then give me information on what that function actually does. So this is probably one of my favorite things, because it means I can go into C, and I can look at like what a C function does as I'm typing it in, and if that's the right one for me. It's similar to, and I think, Xcode's IntelliSense, and Eclipse has a similar thing for their auto-completion engine. But I think that the Emacs one is pretty cool, because I never thought of, like, I can do this in the terminal and actually have the same pop-up, which is pretty cool. So that's autocomplete. I actually have RSense, which is Ruby's autocomplete. I have magic indenting, which means when I paste into a buffer, it'll actually auto-indent. Mouse support is not automatically enabled. Something important to mention. Vim has automatically scrolling, where you can scroll with your mouse in the buffer. You can't do that in Emacs, unless you're in the Windows mode. So instead, I have this function right here, which will actually, when I'm in the terminal, allow me to scroll and click around and copy and select code. And that is my config file. So, yes?
What does the single quote mean in Emacs list?
It is a variable. I think it's a referenced, it's a literal. Yeah, it's a literal variable. So, like, global set key, this is the parameter, and then this is actually what it's doing. So it has a literal list with evaluated code that's going to be run inside of it.
Oh, so it's just saying, give me a list here, but don't evaluate it?
Yeah, not yet. It's something that it's passing in, because when this file gets read, it actually all gets evaluated. So if I didn't have quotes there, that would actually be evaluated, then run whenever I load my config file, and not run when I want it to. So instead, this is actually a list, which is a function that's getting passed in, and it's a lambda, an anonymous function. It's getting passed in to the mouse5 key binding. And so whenever I do mouse5, it'll actually scroll up or scroll down. And so that's what scrolling support does. Okay, so what is a major mode and what is a minor mode? So Emacs has these things called modes. It's not related to modeless or moded, which can be kind of confusing. You can actually see down here, Emacs Lisp is the major mode. It's always listed on the furthest right. And the others are the minor modes. So a major mode is usually associated with a language. So I have a language like Emacs Lisp or Ruby or C or C++ or Objective-C. And you will write a major mode that will provide syntax highlighting and usually recognition of tags and other features that you want to implement. The minor modes extend the ability of that major mode. So in this case, I have Emacs Lisp as my major mode. That's my language mode. PairEdit is simply an extension that gives me the ability to add a parenthesis, and then it auto adds a parenthesis, and then I can actually move around parentheses and do weird things with them. Let's see. Like this. So say I want to move some parentheses around, I can just like move them where I want to, and you see it moving around in some way. So that's PairEdit. AC is the autocomplete mode, and so I actually have autocomplete loaded automatically for all my modes so that auto loads autocomplete, so I have autocomplete support. When I don't have an autocomplete support for a language, I have this other thing called global autocomplete, which is actually where it'll read the file that I'm in and then determine what I'm trying to input based on what the contents of the file are. So it's dumber, but it's still better than nothing, I feel. So I'm actually not going to save this file because I do not want to save this buffer. No, I do not. Oh, so something important to note. You open a file by doing Control-X, Control-F, which is find file. You can actually switch to a buffer by doing Control-X, B, for buffer. You can kill a buffer, that means to close it, by doing CX, K. You can also close all buffers and exit Emacs by doing CX, CC, close. That's pretty important. Can't believe I didn't mention that before. Okay. So, have anything you'd like me to do? No questions? Nothing? Yeah.
What's the easiest way to tell all the modes that you're currently using?
Mode line.
Just at the end, the line at the bottom.
Yep. That is always present. That isn't power line actually. If I were to load Emacs without that, you'll actually see that it's here too. So, if I go into Git Code Flash, yeah, major mode, Ruby. And then I don't have any minor modes loaded right now.
Oh, so it also tells you minor modes.
Yeah, it'll also tell you minor modes. I think I can actually load up. Let's just compare it. What? Oh, I'm running this without my config file loaded, so I don't have access to any of my plugins right now. But if I did, yeah. So that's. Okay, there we go. Yeah. So enhanced Ruby, ECB, AAC. Those are all my minor modes and my major mode. So yeah. Any other questions?
So it seems like it's really pushed towards Lisp, and clearly it supports other things too.
Oh yeah.
I
just don't.
How is the general support for other languages? Does it suffer at all if it's not working in Lisp?
No. I don't do much other development other than Lisp and Emacs because I have Sublime Text on my Mac, which is what I use for like all of my other lightweight stuff. But it does not. Let's see. I'll actually go to that. I'm going to kill that buffer, and then I'm going to find a new file, and I'm going to call it hello.c. And yeah, I'll call it that. Okay, so let's int. Please tell me if I'm doing this wrong, because I do not remember all of my C. Takes no arguments. It is just print, right?
Printf.
It is printf, okay. Oh yeah, that's another thing. Emacs has this really nice indentation mode. So, I will actually reopen my Ruby file because Ruby is one of those things that, okay. So, if I have some block, please stop. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Save, quit. What? Oh, I have it open in the other session. Sorry, that's why. Okay, it was telling me something useful. And it's not killing the buffer. That's interesting. Okay, so yeah, CXB, Achievements Controller. So in Ruby, it'll actually determine where you want your indentation line support automatically based on the major mode. So unlike other editors where you can tab as many times as you want to the right or as many times to the left as you want, the major mode will actually constrain where your indentation lines are based on your config file. So I actually have my indentation line set up as 4 for Ruby because I prefer 4 for Ruby. I know some people, I think the spec is 2, but it'll auto-detect which block you're in and how far deep you are in your code and indent based on that, which is something useful. You were asking about other language support. I actually use Emacs for Ruby. I don't use it for C, but I do use it for Ruby because I find that very useful. Knowing where my indentations are and the scope of my functions is very useful. So yeah. I don't really know what else I could go over. Yeah.
Does Emacs have a built-in help system?
It does have a built-in help system. In fact, no, that is not it. Okay. I do not have the help window open automatically anymore. I think that is in my config file. You know what? Hold on a second. I do not want to save this. I do not want to save that. Yes, I will exit anyway. Okay. Cool. So yes, there is a help menu, and you have a tutorial that you can actually use. So if you want to use a tutorial, you have a tutorial. It is fairly long. It is not too long. It tells you how to navigate and pretty much how to use it. You also have built-in help for being able to look up documentation on certain functions. If you look up a key, it'll actually generate the help documentation based on your key bindings, which is really useful. So if you have a key binding that you defined and you don't remember what it is, you can type in that key binding and it'll actually find out what function it's bound to, which is pretty cool. Yeah, it has a built-in manual, just like Vim. It has a help system, all that sort of stuff. Yes? Yes?
So for other language support, especially compiled languages, you can do your compiles from within Emacs and capture the output and then go to the error and say move to this and it'll bring up. And this was in Emacs 35 years ago when I first started doing Emacs stuff.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons it gained a lot of traction.
Right, that was one reason why anyone who tried to convince me to use VI, I said, show me how you can do this in VI, which at that time was not possible. And I said, I'm not switching, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So now a lot of the features have been like across both platforms, and so like I actually use Vi as well. Like I use Vim mainly because when I need to edit really small files and I like some of its syntax highlighting support and stuff like that, I'll use Vim. But when I really want to get down and like start editing my 13 file C application that I want to move around like all of the project and be able to compile things, I can use Sublime or I use Emacs. I've actually done Java development in Emacs. It actually works pretty well. You can have compiles and run, hook into a Java line and stuff like that. Yeah. Let's see. I actually don't remember how to execute my Slime repo. Let's see. I think I do have this. What's it? Sudoku. Yes. This is slime. No, this is inferiorless, but take that back. This is slime. There we go. So this is slime. So, let's see if I can reload. Eval. Entire. Nope, not region. Eval default. I actually used to remember all of the key bindings for this, and then I forgot them. So please don't judge me based on that. Because as much as I would love to like say that I'm an Emacs wizard, I'm not. I have a friend, and he's the one who talked me into learning this over the summer, and he knows all the key bindings for all of his plugins, and when he whizzes around his files, I cannot follow him. But, yeah, let's do CR. Okay, well, let's just go down to the end of the file then. By the way, this is this backtracking Sudoku solver, so if you're interested in what it really does. And I have a style warning. Okay, cool. So, I do not remember how to run this program, but I can defun. some function called hello, which takes, if I can remember my comment list. Which I can't, clearly, because I can't even remember that functions go inside parentheses. It did not call itself. Interesting. So we're about to overflow. Oh boy. So recursive functions in Lisp, just a little bit fun. But, oh boy. Yes, I want to kill the mini buffer, please. Thank you. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. Did not want to memory overflow. Okay. So yeah, that is one issue. But Lisp will not memory overflow. That's important because it is. I'm using SBCL, and so it does do the automatic turn recursive things into multiple things as you learn PLC. Anyways, so yes, I'm starting to digress. More questions? Yes.
ScapeX shell.
You're beyond me.
Go ahead. ScapeX shell.
Oh.
You can start a shell up inside of Emacs and do commands and then cut and paste between Windows and your shell. And a guy I worked with loved Emacs so much that he had our system administrator set up Emacs as his startup shell when he logged in.
Yeah, there's people who do that. I don't do that though. I actually, it is possible to run. Let's see, I go to term. That is not therm. I want term. It is a dumb terminal, so I'm using a dumb terminal. But yes, I can actually do things like cat. No, it doesn't have syntax highlighting support. Oh well. But yeah, so you do have a shell. There is actually something that I know my friend over here likes. So say you're compiling something from source, and you get tired of waiting for your C file to compile. So you could play Tetris inside Emacs. There are indeed game support for Emacs because compilers get long. So yeah, there's silly stuff. There's cool stuff too. I really like that it's Lisp based because I can modify almost the entire structure of what my editor is and to redefine how it works. Yeah, kill this. That is Sudoku.list. This is only the buffer list. I will kill the buffer list. Yes, I will kill the buffer list. I will also kill Tetris. Why? Yes, I do want to kill a few list. Yep. So Emacs. More questions?
And you've got to end with the one for anyone who might feel like something's really missing here, and that's VI mode.
So there's this thing called Viper, and it offers Vim support inside Emacs. I will. Let's see. No, Emacs. So say I want. So MX. Okay, so you do in Vim when you want to access your prompt, you do colon, right? Yeah. In Emacs, the same thing as MX or escapeX, as you said. And so I have get install, and it'll ask me, what would you like to install? Let's install Viper. Yay, it's installed. We now have Viper mode. So that was me pushing colon just now. That was not MX, that was colon. I do have HJKL support. That's what I'm using right now. I do have E and capital E, and I do have W and B and capital B and all Viper modes, because Because who would want to use Emacs without using Viper Mode, right? Why learn the key bindings that this program offers when you can use Vim mode? Not that I'm putting down Vim. I'm just saying it's a program that it does have its own uses and its own like key bindings. But if you're really gonna like start using a program like Emacs, you should really put the effort into learning how to use the key bindings that it supports. Because when you do that, you'll learn that there are a lot of powers. Being able to rebind CX / which is what I have, into ECB. Switch to Emacs state for the next command. Escaping character. I don't want that character escaped. Okay then. So yeah, the ECB mode, which I normally don't have on the left because it takes up way too much space, is actually rebound to CC /, which is why it brings it up like that. So yeah, lots of bindings. Emacs was built around macros, so the whole point is that you can reconfigure it as much as you want. Yeah. Any other questions? I'm sorry, I'm not like the best guru at Emacs. I'm just giving this talk because I like it and I like using it, and I think other people might like using it as well. So yeah, that's all I got.